share the work, to share the passion for cycling, to share the passion for being out there in nature, for getting out there in the world, for doing things, for being creative. The joy really comes from sharing it with other people and encouraging them to join in on it and to get what I get out of it.
This Ride and Photography Talk is going to be split up into two separate sections, two separate videos. My guest is Jussi Lyons. He's a founding member of Hilltopper Electric Bikes. So we got into a lot of conversation talking about the electric bikes, full electric bikes, as well as conversion kits and traveling with them. And then we have a whole separate conversation all about his travel photography, as well as combining cycling with his photography. I didn't want to cut anything. Both conversations were equally as meaty. There's a lot of stuff to listen to and get into, so I didn't want to cut anything. So instead of condensing it down into one shortened video, I went ahead and split it up into two. You can watch one or the other if one topic is more your speed than the other. Hopefully you'll listen to both. So let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome. I'm Kevin Wenning. Today we've got one of our ride and photography talks. I've got Jussi Lyons with me from Scotland. He now lives in Shanghai, China. He's an avid traveler and can be found taking pictures anywhere around the world. He's a photographer, pilot, and an entrepreneur. This bicycle riding chat has many caps and many talents. He's a founding member of Clean Republic, which is an e-bike manufacturer in Seattle. And his passion for photography started while living in Sendai, Japan in 2012, and it has become a big part of his life. Actually look younger now than you do in this photo, so I don't know what's going on there.
You're so kind. Well, I just finished a 7-day plant-based detox. Maybe that makes a difference.
Clean living.
Yeah, clean living.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
And getting on your bike often. What's your season like there? You have a winter?
Yeah, we have a winter, but it's not much of a winter. It's maybe a month, if that. But we're full into the spring now, and it's starting to warm up. It was like in the mid 80s already yesterday, so it's going to get hot, wow. Really hot and humid again soon. So it's the best time of year to ride your bike. You get a brief window in the fall and a brief window in the 4 weeks, 6 weeks in the spring. Otherwise, it's cold or hot.
Cold, hot, rainy, too humid.
Yeah, humid.
All of the above.
Yeah.
So where did your photography start?
So it started back in around 2011, 2012. I had a colleague of mine, Jose Renteria, who's quite a prolific photographer himself, and he'd been into it a long time, and we were colleagues. We were both pilots together working for the same company, and he took me out one day to go take pictures. He said, "Hey, you want to go take pictures of airplanes at the airport?" And I'm like, "Airplanes? It's my day off. I don't want to go near airplanes." But he said, "No, come on here. Well, you can have one of my cameras and take pictures." And I had a blast. It was a great day and really fun. And then he kind of took me under his wing and tutored me from that point. And he was big into film photography, still now, and develops his own negatives and everything else, and also in the digital medium so both. And he's the one who got me into it, and showed me how a camera works, explained it to me, and advised me on my first camera, little Sony NEX3, I think it was. So yeah, that's how I got into it, and then it just took off. It was so compatible with my lifestyle, travel photography. What do you do as a pilot? You travel, right? So you can always have a camera too in your pocket wherever you go around the world, and as you can see from the images here, you're constantly being exposed to different places and different kinds of light, different kinds of culture, different kinds of people, and you get to record a little bit of history, and you start taking pictures, and then you get to the point where you start creating pictures, and then it really gets fun.
So if your first camera was a Sony NEX3, what's that, like 2009, 2010-ish time frame you got started?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, it's been about
yeah. Looking through your galleries here, you've been a lot of places. Are these places that you frequent as part of your routes for work, or do you make specific trips for photography, photography trips just to these kind of places?
So both. You're seeing a collage, a mix of places I've been through work and places I've also lived, as I've lived in many different countries around the world. But no, I go on specific photography trips these days. So the latest trip was to southern Greenland. Trips to Iceland, trips to New Zealand. I got a trip planned to southern Patagonia to cross an ice field there next year, together with Marco Grassi and some other great photographers. So yeah, I take the time to, like I said before it was in the beginning, it was just I was capturing pictures wherever I happened to be for whatever reason, and now I go with intention of trying to create images, and to a lot of planning goes into it, and pre-visualization and forethought. Yeah.
How do you decide what your next location is going to be?
Uh, talking to people. So, the more you get into photography, the more photography friends you have, and you kind of geek out on it. Everybody's asking everybody where to go, especially for the landscape. It's an interesting thing. Having this conversation. I spoke with Max Rive and some of these landscape photographers that are searching for new unphotographed. It's hard to believe there are very few locations that are unphotographed these days, and going out and looking for those is really fun. But a lot of times I go back to places that have already been photographed by other photographers, and like this one, for example, in southern Greenland. It's in the middle of literally nowhere, but there's a lot of pictures been taken of this valley.
Are you primarily landscape photographer? You're looking for interesting landscapes because you want to shoot those type of landscapes, or are you looking for just adventure? What goes into that thought process? Like, I see a lot of the landscape, but I also see some cityscape and some portraiture. And was that like when you were just going to those places, you just happen to go out and walk around with your camera because I'm there, I'm going to take some photos? Or do you still work those type of places in where you want to take street photography or cityscapes or something like that?
Again, it's kind of a mix of both. When I go to these places like southern Greenland, I go there for the feeling. I go there for the way it makes me feel, and it's so quiet. There's the absence of distraction. There's incredible light. There are no people. You're surrounded by nature, and the primary reason I go there is for the feeling that I feel while I'm there, and then trying to recreate that and share that in a digital image with other people is the challenge. So it's very hard to convey the feeling I had when I was there to the viewers. So that's the goal, and that is quite challenging. So you can do that whether you're walking around a street or walking around a city or walking around in the mountains. It's conveying that feeling that you had while you were there to the viewer, and learning all the tricks to do that.
So when you switched from just taking photographs to thinking about making photos and planning these kind of trips, you said there's a lot that goes into that. What switched, and how do you think about your travels differently now? What kind of goes into the planning of that kind of a trip?
Well, equipment is part of it, but it becomes less and less. I mean, cameras, for example, are so incredible these days. I mean, the amount of development, the amount of money that Sony, for example, has put into this camera development over the years. So basically, any digital camera these days can capture or record incredible scenes. But it's more about logistics. Often it's about timing, about light, being able to stay on location long enough to wait for the weather or wait for the light. Hardship being out there in the middle of the night, freezing to death on the top of a mountain. or so these kind of things. So just planning on how long you can stay in these kind of places, and do you enjoy it? Fortunately, I enjoy it. I like being out in the middle of nowhere. um and I
Is it
patience. Yeah.
is it easier to plan those kind of trips by yourself, or easier to do that and get those photos when you're with, I don't want to say other people, but with another group of photographers who everybody's there for the same purpose to go in, make these type of photos?
Everything is easier when you have a singleness of purpose. So if you're with a bunch of photographers on a photography trip and you're out in southern Greenland taking pictures of icebergs, yeah, it's a lot easier because, of course, there's a social element, but the primary purpose is photography. So it makes it easier, and everybody gets to help each other and have different ideas, and it fosters creativity. But it's in stark contrast to going on a family weekend and, or taking your bike out, or going cycling, or going out with people. Let's just stick with your family as an example. If you want to take pictures and go on a trip with your family, it doesn't work. You end up with bad experiences with your family, with the people, because you're not paying attention to them, and you end up with bad pictures because you're not paying attention to the photography. So it's a very clear thing for me today. I decide, okay, I'm going to take pictures. I'm on my own. I'm away from people, unless it's a photography trip. If I want to spend time with people, the camera stays in the bag, or the camera stays at home. So that's a conscious choice. That's something I've learned the hard way. It's a conscious choice these days.
Okay. So that was the distinction I wanted to make about traveling with other people versus with other photographers,
Right.
because the photography group is all there with the sole purpose of helping each other make better photos, paying attention, being patient, waiting for the light. Whereas my wife, she doesn't want to sit there and wait for an hour waiting for the clouds to move or the light to be in the right spot. She's like, I'm going to go. I'll see you.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then I either don't get the shot I want, she's unhappy, and I've come to the same conclusion for myself.
Yeah. Take
And
the stress out of it. Make the decision beforehand, and stick with it, and articulate that. Tell the people, hey, I'm not hanging out with you. I'm taking pictures, or leave the camera at home.
so I think the answer to my one of my questions here is definitely a no. Then you don't combine your bike rides or your cycling with photography. You don't take a camera on your rides at all, right?
Well, having just said that, you can't really shut down the photographer in you. You're always looking at scenes and light and opportunities and subjects. So basically, every time I'm on my bike, I have a camera or two with me. As a matter of fact, I was out yesterday with a friend of mine. We had a 360 camera, and we're playing around with video while we're on road bikes racing down along the river. So you can have a lot of fun. And basically, I have a camera with me everywhere I go. Um, so I don't think it goes against what I just said, but there's always opportunities that pop up to capture great images, and there's no reason not to have a camera with you. Doesn't mean you can't socialize with other people, but yeah, I take a lot of pictures when I'm riding my bike or wherever I am. So.
But you're probably not going, and this is, I guess I'm answering the same question for myself. I don't ever take a camera on a bike ride with the intention of making a great photo. I take it
No.
because I want to take pictures of my mates and I on a ride, of, if something interesting does happen. And I've come to the point where, and this is the same on my trips, my tours, people ask, are we taking a camera on our bike? No, there's a dedicated part of the day that's for the bike ride. Enjoy it. Just take your time there, enjoy being on the bike. And then we have another half of the day that's dedicated to photography. And there've been studies about this. Basically, the activity, getting on your bike, doing some sort of exercise, stimulates that thought and stimulates your brain energy, and stimulates also the awareness of what's around you. So and that to me is just part of why I love being on a bike anyway. I feel like I'm more connected to the place that I'm at, rather than just on a bus, on a train, something like that. My bike connects me to that place and makes me more aware. and so does my photography. The two kind of serve that purpose for me. So now I'll ride my bike through a scene that I think I might want to photograph, and just kind of make mental notes like, okay, the sun is there. This is what it looks like this time of day. And then I'll come back later and take photos of it maybe. So I use my bike rides as scouting for my photography time, if you will.
Yeah, it's good. It's great to hear. It's great to hear people talk about that, because you know, it segues into this thing that I talk about a lot, is being present. And you know, being present to me is bringing your mind in line with your activity. So your mind is in line with what your body's doing. And you know, photography is very presencing. You can't, I mean, you're holding a camera or you got it on a tripod, you're very intently focused on the equipment and what you're doing. Your mind is, that's why you can have a conversation with somebody else in the background, right? And try to do both. You are really focused on what you're doing and capturing this image, and paying attention to the light and the subject and the technical aspect of it. But then, you know, riding a bicycle, you can be completely free to dream and to think and let your mind wander. And you know, you're turning the pedals there, and you're actually going through the woods or through the mountains or wherever you are. But you can float away from it. So that is not being present in a way, in the same way that photography is. Let's say you're on a bike race or training. Now your thoughts are in line with keeping your feet moving in a circle, and you know, so there's this constant mind lining up with body, and then drifting apart again. And yeah, I like what you said about slowing down there. I mean, I think being on your bicycle helps you. Actually, it's too fast for me sometimes. When I walk the same routes that I normally cycle, I think a lot more about photography, and I observe things. I notice things that I otherwise don't notice, because I'm slowed down yet another level just by walking.
That's an interesting way to think about it too.
Yeah.
I like the way you said that when you're on your bike, you go back and forth between being really present in what you're doing and just kind of letting your mind wander. I wanted to touch on that a little bit more as far as, you know, present, I guess. And I think you covered it pretty well. But is that something I've seen that in your writing more than one time? Is that you know, a life philosophy that you try and carry through everything that you do? Or yeah, where did that come from, and why do you hold on to that?
Well, I hold on to it because we only really have the now, right? You can live in the future and the past in your mind, but reality and the truth is only really in the now. There is nothing else, right? So if you neglect the present by focusing on the future, then you lose it. You only get so much of life, and you don't know when the end is coming. It definitely is coming at some point, but focusing in the now and trying to stay there is challenging, especially with the amount of distraction in our modern age. And you know, there's three pillars that help me stay grounded and stay present. And you know, one of them is physical exercise. You know, I do a lot of cycling on a daily basis for commuting, like I mentioned, and also for fun. Do a lot of yoga as a physical exercise. The other one is this creative outlet, and this is where, you know, photography fills that for me. Cycling fulfills this physical aspect, and the third one for me is, you know, this connection, a deep connection with another human being that is without judgment. That's usually not your significant other. But yeah, so having those three pillars helps me stay present, and they're all great in their own way. They all help either go into this floaty, creative, etheric world, or they bring you back to a very focused body mind connection. It's something that I try to be aware of, and obviously it starts with awareness, and also, you know, riding. That's why we sell electric bikes, is to try to bring the awareness of people back to, hey, you don't need more stuff. Here's an electric bike kit. Get on the bike. The best bike's the one you already have, right? So get on your bike and ride it, and remember how it feels and the experiences you have, and all the benefits of it. People should move more, eat more healthy, move more, and pay attention to your sleep.
I see why you and Trey Ratcliffe get along well.
Yeah, we have that self-inquiry path too. Yeah.
Same philosophical mindset there.
Yeah.
Well, my last question there, I think you already answered it, was basically if writing and photography serve similar purposes in your life, or do they do different things for you? And you pretty much just nailed it with your explanation about being present and using them both to escape and just daydream and let your mind wander and be creative, and they also focus you. So they do both things.
Yeah. They definitely serve a common purpose in life, in the big picture for me, and they're also fun. They're both very challenging in many ways. There's also no limits to either one, right? You can go to all kinds of levels with cycling in the different categories of cycling, and you can go to, it's an endless journey with photography too, and creativity, and whatever direction you choose to go with them. So they're both these mediums where there's really no limits, and you and I have a lot of fun, and I try to share that fun and that joy with other people too. This whole
Wow.
creative aspect didn't start till very late in my life. I was not very late, but I was in my 30s before I ever picked up a camera. It's not easy though. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of changed behavior, maybe is the word I'm looking for. And it's good to, and also to step into the uncomfortable. How do I get from snapshots with my iPhone to large scale prints, artistic landscape prints? It takes work, and you just gotta do it. Just get out there and do it.
You hit on something that I don't think a lot of people actually enjoy, is that process of being uncomfortable, getting into something and realizing this is going to take some work, and I've got to commit to it and dedicate myself to it a little bit. Same thing goes for being on my bike. I love those rides at the end of the season where I feel like I could go forever. My legs are strong. I could do 10,000 vertical feet in a day, ride up in the mountains and come back home, and I did 150 miles. But I had to ride the whole season to get to that stage. I had to put in the miles and put in the work. I love that. And the same thing, when I create a photo, that it just comes together. It didn't just happen. I made a lot of really, really, really crappy photos before I had the ability to go to a scene and just make it feel so effortless. So that I like the reward that comes from seeing something through, rather than just pick it up. And I've never been somebody who was just naturally good at something. I always had to work hard at things. So maybe that's just my way of telling myself that I enjoy the process. But I like what comes from from refusing to give up and from committing to something.
It's a really important point you make there. I think I enjoy the process as much as I enjoy the result. I'll say that when it comes to being out there taking the photographs, love that part. Post-processing, which is a part, obviously, as you can see, of my workflow, is a huge part. I really enjoy that too, and it can get a little overwhelming at time when you take thousands of photographs in a day or a couple of days. But if you don't enjoy that process too, then it becomes like work, and it's like cleaning your bicycle, right? Cleaning and maintaining your bicycle. If you don't enjoy that part, buying new parts for it and geeking out and comparing it to other bikes, if you don't get some kind of emotional response out of that, then it becomes a chore. But at one point I'll mention real quick, is that with hobbies you go through phases. Like I go through phases where I'm really into my photography for a while, or I'm really into my cycling during the summertime, and then I'm not in the wintertime, or my photography takes a lull. doesn't mean I don't like it anymore. It doesn't mean I'm not passionate about it. It's just, maybe something else in my life has popped up that takes a higher priority for a while. But it never goes away. It's something that can be carried with us. Cycling is never going to not be a part of my life. Photography is never not going to be a part of my life, and I get so much joy from it. And it kind of ebbs and flows in its own way, and it's really a relationship that is going to be with us forever. And there's an incredible amount of depth to it too.
You also have to put in the work and engage in that activity to renew the relationship, to carry it forward, just like your wife, just like your kids.
Any relationship, constant work. You wake up in the morning, you have to say to yourself, hey, my whatever relationships you have, particularly the ones with people, they need constant work in order for, it's kind of like if they're not, if you're not working on them, they're getting worse. They're like physical exercise, right? Your body, if you're not moving, if you're standing still, your body starts to atrophy, you start to decay, everything doesn't work as well. Relationships are the same way, photography, cycling, all of it. We're all connected.
Are there any favorite photos you have here that you want to point out and maybe tell us just briefly about what's your post-processing style?
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to. So as you can see from all of my photography, there's definitely a clear style to it, right? It's kind of a darker, maybe moody, highly saturated HDR looking style of photography. Some images are quite heavily processed. Other ones, like this one here, are not so heavily processed. Okay. So I do a lot of HDR photography. That's for sure. Whether the image I process it in an HDR way at the end, I definitely take lots of different frames at different exposures to give myself options. So it's more of a data capture when I'm out there trying to create an image. Basically, I'm capturing data because I know what I can do in post-processing afterwards, right? So I don't add anything to my photographs. I don't add sunshine or add objects or delete objects. I have my own personal code, and everybody has their own code, and they decide what is right and wrong, or what you should and shouldn't do, and everyone has their own opinion about that. But I don't. I just leave it.
You mentioned you were talking to Max Rive, which he has a very distinct style, very deep lights and darks in his photos, and brings out a lot of sharpness. Sometimes he adds light to the image. Well, I've actually been working through one of his tutorials on post-processing because I like his processing style. And then sometimes, when I see something in his photo, I'm like, is that a little too far? But, clearly he's made that choice for himself. Yeah. And I just actually wrapped up a basic photo editing tutorial thing that I posted on my website. And my whole philosophy about it is you can't choose not to do something if you don't even know that it's possible. So I like knowing how far can I possibly push this? And then it's up to me to choose, okay, I'm not going to do that. But if I understand, the principle about what makes a strong image, why do people want to look at that? Why am I drawn to making those kind of images? Then you can keep working down that path. So I meet a lot of photographers who say, oh, I don't post-process my images. That makes it not a true photo. What the hell are you talking about? Why would you not at least want to have that tool in your toolbox to use, and then you can choose when to use it or when not to?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And, to go back to the HDR thing real quick. So, and also about rules. So you learn the basic rules of photography, composition, the mathematics behind it. And then you have to know the rules in order to break them, right? In a creative way. And also with HDR, with cameras record the actual scene as it is, right? our minds highly filter. Our minds are like Photoshop on steroids, right? So the organ of our eye sees what we see, and then our mind completely processes it. It changes color, it adds depth, it does, we see in stereo, cameras see in mono, all these aspects, and then it presents the image to us, right? So when we see an HDR, for example, I'll just use HDR. This is an HDR image. And it's pushed a little bit fluffy and dreamy, but our cameras, you know when you go and take a photograph and you look at the scene and they look different, right? Because the camera, the camera doesn't do any of this processing, and HDR images actually look a lot closer to reality, but we have to do a lot of work to them to get them to look like what they look like when we look with them with our eyes. Does that make sense? So cameras record in mono, right? And we see in stereo, right? So it's two-dimensional versus three-dimensional, and trying to create a three-dimensionality back into a two-dimensional photograph takes work, right? You have to adjust light and contrast and adjust things to try to get that depth back in the image, which is really what the reality is. But the camera can't show that. So
the way I like to think of that too is when you're photographing a scene, you're capturing just this, and your eyes are taking in the whole rest of the scene. You're seeing, okay, the sun's over there and there's clouds over there, and you can sense a mood. You sense the place because you're there.
Yeah.
But in a photo, you've got to bring all of that atmosphere down into your frame to tell people who see that photo, what did it actually feel like to be here? If you went here, this is what your emotion might be. So you got to bring all of that atmosphere into just this little spot you're creating for me.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Another thing today, in the day and age, is another example. Like if you're holding a phone out in front of you, you're looking at a screen instead of through a viewfinder, right? You're looking at the scene, you're trying to compose a picture, you're still aware of everything on the periphery. You still see it, right? Whereas if you have your camera to your face and you're looking through a viewfinder, you only see what the camera's seeing. You have no distraction of any kind. It makes a huge difference in your composition and the final image.
On an image like this, how would you approach post-processing this?
So all the images I take are raw file, Sony raw file formats. Basically, everything goes into. I used to use Lightroom as my cataloging software. I now use Luminar 4. It's still got a few gimmicks, and there's some progress that needs to be made with it. But it's a lot more. I like it. I like it better. Especially when it comes to the processing part of it. So I use Luminar 4, I use Aurora HDR a lot, and of course Photoshop. Photoshop's usually the end of my editing process, but those three programs, I guess, less and less Lightroom, but I still use Lightroom. So I kind of jump around. The image jumps around through its different software realms, and then comes out in the end.
Sure.
So taking raw files. Yeah.
So in this scene, what did you enhance?
So this scene here is 5 exposures, and it's on a tripod. Well, a lot of my photographs are taken on a tripod. I carry a tripod around with me because I do a lot of landscape images, and I do a lot of multiple exposure images too. So that's important to have the camera steady. So I took 5 different images. I blended them together. The only difference in them was the exposure. I enhanced the colors a little bit. I threw in. I had to wait for calm water. This is right where we were camping for the night. So I had some time to wait for the sun to get in the right place, for the shadows to be there. So it's more about setting the camera up and waiting for the conditions to be like you want them to be when capturing the image, knowing how you can blend it together. Aurora HDR was used predominantly in this image, and it's an example of heavy processing. I would say this is a heavily processed image. It's not everybody's style. A lot of people don't care for it, but I like it. That's what matters.
But yeah, again, you got to know what's possible
Yeah.
in order to, and sometimes you got to just play around with things, even if you end up throwing away that edit because you just don't like it.
Mm.
It's digital. You're out an hour, 2 hours at the most because you were just playing around, practicing something.
Yeah. I'll say this about presets. I use a lot of presets for creative ideas. So if you just take the raw image that you start with, and then you throw a lot of different presets at it, it often gives you ideas about how light would look better, or color, or it's often very helpful. I don't end up using the preset in the end. I end up processing in a direction towards that preset, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, processing is all about local adjustments. It's all about doing a little bit here and a little bit there, and there's no one size fits all. So it takes time because of that. You can't just there's not just one filter you can throw on and boom, you're good. It's different software packages that are used, different parts of different filters that are used, and then when they're all blended together to come up with a final image. So it's different for every image. Yeah.
So on this one, why the dreamy look there on the mountain in the background?
Yeah, it was a dream. I mean, this is southern Greenland, and I'm just there by myself, sitting by the top end of this fjord with this glacier there, dreaming about how lucky I am to be there, how fortunate I am to watch yet another sunset, and knowing that the next time I go back there, half of that glacier is going to be there if I ever go back there. So these moments are there to cherish, and it's just to get lost in my thoughts and forget about the photography. And I was trying to bring back the feeling that I had while I was sitting there. It was a very dreamy kind of moment.
Yeah, I like it. You create a definite strong feeling. People either are going to like it or not, but you can't deny that the photographer had a vision for this photo.
Some photographs for me, I have the raw file, and then I have a vision for it while I begin to process it. And some images I start, okay, I can pre-visualize what I want, and I go out there to capture the data, and I have a very clear idea before I even take the picture of what the end product to look like. And some of them start with the end product, the file, and then find a look from there. Some I don't touch at all. Some I just leave exactly the way they are. There's nothing to do, which is important too.
I'm a little jealous of photographers who know exactly what kind of image they want to create. Like Max Drive is a good example. He does a ton of research beforehand, knows where I'm going to stand, and Google Earth is great for getting the lay of the land in a lot of these remote places. Even they don't have the best imagery, but you can extrapolate from topography and Google Earth. If I'm standing here, I'm going to be looking at that peak and this river, and then you as a photographer can go and execute that. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Like if you're traveling with other people, you're probably not going to have that flexibility. You got to be on a mission to make that kind of an image.
Yeah, and it can be tremendously disappointing too. Like you can put a huge amount of work and a huge amount of effort into trying to get what you want, and it just doesn't work out, and then you're left with that feeling. What do you do with that feeling? And you're just left there, and it's blah. It's cloudy, overcast, no sunshine, whatever, no light. It's flat, and you're like, well, this is where it's really important to enjoy the process, because otherwise, you're just frustrated and annoyed. Yeah, I spend a lot of money going on a trip somewhere, hoping that it's going to be this epic. I'm going to come back with these pictures like Max Drive and everybody else, and it didn't happen. So, what do you do with that emotion? What do you do with that?
There's always something that what I'm not going to do next time I plan this sort of a trip.
Yeah, but you always learn. Embrace the emotions, whatever they are, and you always learn something when you're out there. And again, the point is to share the word, to share the passion for cycling, to share the passion being out there in nature, for getting out there in the world, for doing things, for being creative. And the whole point is that, I mean, I do it for me selfishly, but the joy really comes from sharing it with other people and encouraging them to join in on it and to get what I get out of it.
Join in on your photography or your cycling or both.
Yeah.
Is there any place you haven't been yet that you absolutely, if time, money was no option or no object, you would be there in a heartbeat? Where do you want to most cycle or plan a photography trip in the world?
Well, I kind of have it already planned, but it's southern Patagonia. I'll be down in Patagonia next year. I haven't been down there to take pictures. I haven't been down there to ride bikes, but that's where I'm going. Maybe there's some drone photography in there too. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And it's gonna be a big trip, a lot of planning involved, and super excited about it.
Awesome. Yep, haven't gotten there either. That one's on my list as well. I love talking bikes and photography. You've been a fantastic guest. Thank you for taking all this time to talk with me.
Well, thank you very much, Kenny. I appreciate the opportunity, and again, the point is, get out there and try.